It was around 10 p.m. when the lights suddenly cut off, plunging the house into darkness. The old house creaked and groaned as it always did when the power went out, but tonight the air felt heavier, more oppressive. My grandma, ever prepared for such moments, calmly lit several candles, casting flickering shadows on the walls. She motioned for all of us to gather around the big wooden table in the dining room. My two sisters, my mother, and I obediently filed in, taking our seats on the hard, uncomfortable chairs that lined the table. We all sat close to one another, as if the mere proximity of family might shield us from whatever was to come. Grandma, in her usual way, quietly moved about the room, closing every door tightly behind her, even though no one had asked. There was always something unsettling about the way she did things. Her movements were deliberate, too deliberate for someone of her age. She wasn't the warm, loving grandmother that other children had. No, my grandma was different. There was something ancient about her. Something older and colder than her wrinkled skin and silver hair suggested. I had always known there was something not quite right with her. Something off. But I never spoke about it to my mother. I had a feeling she knew, though. She had her suspicions, too. I could tell by the way her eyes darted nervously when Grandma would speak of certain things. Grandma was obsessed with the old stories of our small town, tucked away in the far eastern part of Poland. She believed every urban legend, every whisper of the supernatural that had traveled through the generations. And it wasn't just that she believed them. She reveled in them, loved to tell them, often scaring us senseless with tales of creatures that lurked in the shadows, monsters that could only exist in nightmares. It wasn't uncommon for her to tell us stories late at night when the house felt too quiet, when we were all gathered together. I'm not sure if it was the dark that made her stories feel so real, or the way she would close every window and door, sealing us in as if to keep whatever haunted her tales from escaping. But tonight felt different. She only closed the doors, and that was all. For tonight, Grandma said, her voice surprisingly soft, I've prepared something special for us. We all exchanged wary glances, though none of us said anything aloud. We had grown used to her tales, but over the past few weeks, there had been an unsettling edge to them, more urgency, a darkness that hadn't been there before. Grandma had always loved to scare us with the weirdest, most far-fetched monsters, but there was something about the way she spoke now that made me uncomfortable. My two sisters and I sat still listening, our mother beside us, her face pale in the dim candlelight. Grandma looked over at us with a small, almost conspiratorial smile. I know none of you enjoy my stories, she continued, but this will be the last urban legend I tell you. Is that all right? Everyone nodded quickly, relieved that tonight's tale would be the last. None of us really enjoyed her stories. They were always too strange, too unsettling. They were the kind of stories that didn't end, that haunted your thoughts long after the telling. But at least it would be over tonight, or so we thought. Grandma smiled again, as though pleased with our agreement. Then she began her story in her quiet, raspy voice that seemed to reverberate in the stillness of the room. There is a terrible creature, she said, her eyes glinting strangely in the candlelight, that lives in the lake behind our house. It has been there for as long as I can remember. It's been watching us, waiting. It was in the 1960s when it first decided to come out of the water. I was washing the dishes in the kitchen that day when I saw it outside the window. It was huge, about 3 meters tall, with long, skinny arms and skin that was yellow like old parchment. It looked like something that didn't belong, something wrong. It stood there for a moment, just staring at the window, then it knocked 3 times. 3 times on the glass. Knock, knock, knock. I was so frightened, my heart stopped. I froze, not knowing what to do. I closed my eyes, just praying, hoping it would go away. I didn't dare open them, not until I felt the chill in the air lift, and it worked. For that night, it went away. Her voice trailed off, and the silence in the room grew heavier. None of us spoke, though the air felt thick with something. A strange tension that no one dared to break. My thoughts raced. A creature? A monster in the lake behind our house? It was the kind of story Grandma had told us countless times before, yet this one felt different. More personal, more urgent. I glanced at my sisters, their faces pale and wide-eyed in the flickering light. My mother's face was unreadable, but I could see her hand twitching at her side, as though she wanted to say something, but was unsure if she should. Grandma's words hung in the air, their weight pressing down on us, as though the darkness outside was creeping closer, wrapping its cold fingers around us, eager to pull us into the depths of the story. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in the air tonight. It wasn't just the usual fear and unease I felt when listening to her stories. There was something else now, something darker. Grandma had always believed in the myths and legends, the strange creatures that supposedly roamed our town. But tonight, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't just telling a story. Maybe she was warning us. But what was it she was truly trying to prepare us for? The second time I saw it, I was 20 years older. It was a cold, eerie night, and the house felt just as still as it had all those years ago. The power had gone out again, as it always seemed to do when I was alone in that house. The air was thick with the kind of tension that makes every creak and groan of an old building feel louder than it should. I had grown accustomed to the dark by then, to the way my grandmother's stories lingered in my mind like ghosts that refused to leave. It had been nearly 20 years since that night. 20 long years since I first heard those knocks on the window. But this time, it wasn't a story. It wasn't a warning. This time, it was real. I was sitting by the window, my mind wandering back to those dark memories when I heard it, the soft thud of something tapping against the glass. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the knock came again. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. The room seemed to grow colder, the silence pressing against me like a weight I couldn't escape. I turned slowly toward the window, my heart hammering in my chest. There it was, the creature. It was exactly as I remembered. The same long, skinny limbs, the same yellow, sickly skin stretched taut over its gaunt frame. But this time, there was something different about it. Something darker. Its eyes, if you could call them eyes, were just empty hollows that seemed to suck the light from the room. Its smile, if it could even be called a smile, was wide and grotesque, an unnatural curve that stretched too far across its face. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My body was frozen in place, my mind racing. I had seen it before, and now it was back. I had made the mistake of looking at the drawing. It knocked 3 times again, and this time I didn't close my eyes. I couldn't. Something inside me, some primal instinct, compelled me to watch, to see what would happen if I didn't turn away. Maybe I could understand it, figure out what it was, what it wanted. But as I stood there, my heart sinking into my stomach, the creature's presence became unbearable. I could feel its gaze cutting through me, piercing into my very soul. I didn't want to look away, but I couldn't help it. There was an overwhelming urge to shut my eyes, to pray that it would go away. But I knew deep down that no prayer could save me now. Then it did something that I'll never forget. It turned its head slowly, unnaturally so, and I swear to you, it grinned at me. I slammed the window shut with all my might, the sound echoing through the room. But it was too late. The creature was inside. I don't know how long it took. It might have been minutes or hours. Time blurred into something indistinguishable as the world around me twisted and shattered. I remember hearing horrible, wet sounds, screams, gurgles, and the sickening squelch of flesh being torn apart. When I finally gathered the courage to look, the sight that greeted me was too much to bear. My mother. She was lying on the floor, her body contorted in a pool of blood. Her stomach was torn open, her intestines spilling out in a gruesome display. Her eyes were wide with horror, though they were empty now, void of life. But the most chilling part was her final words. She had whispered, "Draw it, and never look at it again. Never let anyone see the drawing." Her voice had been weak, trembling as she spoke, but there was an undeniable urgency in her plea, and then she was gone, her body lying cold and lifeless before me. I didn't know what to do. I was lost in a haze of confusion and fear, but I did the one thing my mother had asked of me. I drew the creature.
From memory, I sketched it quickly, the image burning into my mind like a curse. I hid the drawing, buried it deep in a drawer, thinking that would be enough. But the temptation to test it, to see if what she had said was true, gnawed at me. So I did it. I bought a cat, a small, innocent creature, and forced it to stare at the drawing. Nothing happened at first. For several days, there were no knocks on the window. I began to believe that maybe I had been wrong. Maybe the creature wasn't real after all. But then, exactly 1 week later, I heard it. The same 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I rushed to the window, and that's when I found the cat, dead in the dining room, its eyes wide in terror, its body mutilated in the same way as my mother's. I had done it again. I had brought it back. Over the next few days, I repeated the experiment. I tried with other animals, dogs, rabbits, whatever I could get my hands on. And every time, the result was the same. The creature would come back, always knocking 3 times, always bringing death in its wake. And then I remembered something else. It was the moment I had first seen that horrifying sketch of the creature, when Grandma had stopped talking, her grin widening as she watched me, tears in my eyes. I realized she had known. She had always known. Terror gripped my chest as I heard the familiar sound. The 3 knocks, this time from behind me, as I sat in the same dining room where it had all begun. I closed my eyes, my body shaking as I prayed. I whispered the words over and over, begging for it to stop. When I opened my eyes again, everything was wrong. The room was still, but the bodies of my family, my mother, my sisters, and even Grandma, were all there, sitting at the table, dead, their bodies disemboweled just like my mother's had been. The same cold, empty expressions on their faces. Even Grandma, whose twisted grin was the last thing I saw before my world collapsed into darkness. I couldn't escape. I couldn't wake up from this nightmare. It was too late.
Grandma, why can't we ever go into the woods? I was only 6 years old when I asked that question. My parents had always told me to stay away from the forest that lay just beyond the edge of our small village. But whenever I asked them why, they would simply avoid answering. I was curious, too curious for my own good. My grandmother, who had always seemed like a figure out of ancient folklore herself, turned to look at me. Even at such a young age, I could sense that something in her expression was off, like she was trying to hide something. "Well," she began, her voice low and steady, "it's because of the man in white." I blinked, unsure of what she meant. My confused expression must have been obvious, because she continued, a shiver running through her words. "Your parents haven't told you about him?" she asked, as though I should have known all along. I shook my head. I'd never heard of such a man before. She looked at me for a long moment, the kind of look that made me feel like she was measuring whether I was ready to hear what she was about to say. Then, with a sigh, she leaned in a little closer, her voice dropping even lower. "You see, he's not just a man. He's something much worse. Something like a demon, but he hides in plain sight. He's beautiful, so beautiful that you wouldn't think twice about following him, no matter how far he leads you. He uses that beauty to lure you deep into the woods." She paused, letting her words hang heavy in the air. My heart started to race, but I stayed quiet, my eyes wide, waiting for her to continue. "But the deeper you go," she went on, "the more you start to see his true form. The beauty fades away and you see him for what he really is, something grotesque. And when you're too far in, when you can't turn back, that's when he shows you his true face. That's when he kills you." I swallowed hard. "What does he look like?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. Grandma's eyes grew distant, as if remembering something too painful to speak of. "From what I remember, he looks just like any other man. A little short, with short black hair and pale skin. He's unremarkable at first, but don't let that fool you, he's more than what you see. Is there any way to escape him?" I asked, my voice trembling. She shook her head slowly. "No, he's so beautiful that once you see him you can't help but follow him. You'll want to follow him. You won't even think to run." I could feel the fear creeping into my bones, but Grandma just smiled, like she was trying to comfort me. "But don't worry, darling, it's just an old story, a legend, something your parents believed to keep you safe." I nodded, but even then, I wasn't convinced. I could tell that my grandmother wasn't just telling me a story. There was something deeply unsettling in her voice, something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't just the fear of an old tale, it was a deeper, more personal fear, one I couldn't fully understand at the time. That night I had trouble sleeping, and the conversation with Grandma kept replaying in my mind. The man in white, what kind of monster was he really? I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play here, something beyond a simple folk tale. But I convinced myself it was just that, an old legend, a story to scare children into behaving. 20 years passed, and I had moved away from my hometown. I had lived a full life, one far removed from the old woods my grandmother had warned me about. Still, that conversation had never fully left me. It lingered in the back of my mind, a shadow that never quite disappeared. Recently, I decided to return to my hometown, to visit the old house and the small village that had been a part of my childhood. On the last day of my visit, I found myself standing at the edge of those very woods Grandma had warned me about. I had never ventured this far into the trees before, but now I was filled with a strange mix of curiosity and defiance. After all, it had been years. Surely it was just a story, a tale passed down from one generation to the next, designed to keep us safe. I wasn't a child anymore, so I stepped into the woods. For the first few minutes, I simply admired the quiet beauty of the trees, the soft rustling of the leaves, the birds singing overhead. The forest was peaceful, almost magical in its stillness. It felt like the kind of place I had always dreamed of exploring, but never dared to. Then, after about 15 minutes of walking, I saw him. He was standing between the trees, so still that for a moment I thought he was just a trick of the light. But no. There he was, a man, dressed in white. He was short, with black hair and pale skin, exactly as Grandma had described. He was staring directly at me. I froze. My heart skipped a beat and a cold chill ran down my spine. He didn't move, just watched me with an unsettling calmness. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, not sure whether to run or stay. And then, he smiled. A smile that was too wide, too perfect. His teeth gleamed unnaturally white, and something in his eyes, something darker, deeper, told me that this man was no mere traveler. It was him, the man in white. I turned to run, but before I could take a single step, I felt my body lock in place, my legs frozen, as if weighed down by something invisible. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. And just like that, I knew. This was no legend. This was real. He was stunning, almost unreal. His skin was as white as snow, and it matched the pristine, flowing clothes he wore. His black hair was like a velvet curtain, stark against his pale complexion. There was something about him, something that went beyond mere physical beauty. Words can't quite capture the effect he had on me. The mere sight of him made my lips curl into an involuntary smile, a smile I couldn't control even if I wanted to. Suddenly, he turned toward me. His movement was fluid, almost like he was gliding. Hello, he said, his voice low and calm, almost musical. There was a softness to it, a peacefulness that seemed to settle the nerves I didn't even realize I had. His pale face flushed with the slightest tinge of embarrassment. "Hey," I stammered, my voice faltering as my cheeks turned hot. I didn't know why, but I felt an overwhelming warmth flood my face. I smiled, almost nervously, and he smiled back, a smile so perfect, so beautiful that it seemed to hold an invitation. His lips curled in a way that was both coy and inviting, and it made my heart race in a way I couldn't explain. Would you like to come with me?" His voice had a gentle pull, an irresistible allure. "Where?" I asked, despite already feeling like I knew the answer. "To my home." He nodded slightly, his eyes never leaving mine. The redness on my cheeks deepened and I could barely form words. "Okay, sure," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He reached out, his hand brushing mine, and I felt a jolt run through me at the touch. It was so gentle, so delicate, yet the feeling was electric. I almost swooned from the simplicity of it.
Do you mind if I started, feeling shy but unable to pull away. "Not at all," he answered quickly, his voice still smooth like silk. Without a second thought, our fingers intertwined. His hand felt like it belonged there, like it was meant to be there, and we began to walk deeper into the forest. As we moved, I noticed something strange happening. The forest around us seemed to shift, to grow more beautiful with every step. The trees grew taller, their leaves thicker, and the sunlight filtering through them made everything look like a dream. A perfect, serene dream. We walked for what seemed like hours, but time felt irrelevant in his presence. It was as if the whole world had faded away, leaving only the two of us in this magical place. The deeper we went, the more entranced I became by the beauty that surrounded us. Everything felt perfect. Finally, we arrived at a small wooden cabin nestled between the trees. It was charming in its rustic simplicity, the kind of place you only see in fairy tales. "We're here," he said, his voice still calm and inviting as he opened the door. I followed him inside, closing the door softly behind me. It smelled of wood and something faintly sweet, but there was also something off. Something in the air shifted, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I looked around the small, cozy room, admiring the charm of the place. But then I noticed that his expression had changed. It was subtle, but it was enough to make me feel uneasy. He locked eyes with me, and then, without warning, his hands shot up to his face. I took a step back, unsure of what was happening. His fingers dug into his skin, as though trying to tear it away, scratching and clawing at his face with a desperate urgency. Blood began to pour from the wounds, but he didn't seem to care. He just kept peeling, his eyes locked onto mine with a strange intensity. "Are you okay?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. He didn't respond. Instead, he continued to rip at his skin, as if it were nothing more than a mask. My breath caught in my throat as the skin on his face peeled away, revealing something far worse than I could have imagined.
Underneath, his true form was revealed. Thick, gurgling black sludge oozed from his face, dripping down his neck and onto the floor. It was disgusting, an abomination, something that defied everything I thought I knew about reality. It wasn't human, it was far worse. I stumbled back, horrified. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what I was seeing, but I couldn't. The sludge crept toward me, slow and relentless, its dark tendrils reaching for me. Panicking, I turned to run. My legs trembled beneath me as I rushed for the door, but when I grabbed the handle, I realized it was locked. I tugged at it, desperately trying to get out, but it wouldn't budge. The creature was getting closer, and I could hear its gurgling, wet sounds behind me. Without thinking, I turned and ran for the window. My body crashed through the glass, the sharp shards slicing into my skin. The pain was excruciating, but I couldn't stop. I had to escape. I had to get away from whatever that thing was. I hit the ground hard, my body aching from the fall and the glass that had pierced me. I was bleeding, but I didn't care. I had to get away. I stumbled to my feet and ran as fast as I could, though the pain in my body slowed me down. I don't know how I did it, but somehow I managed to stumble my way out of the woods and to the nearest town. I found a hospital, somehow managing to get help. The doctors didn't ask questions, but I didn't tell them the truth. They wouldn't believe me. No one would. I left the town the next day. I couldn't stay there. The woods, the man in white, the cabin, it was all too much, too real. I never went back. I never will. And now, if you're reading this, I have only one thing to say. Look out for the man in white. I'm a rookie cop working the night shift in a small rural town. My shifts are pretty routine. Driving around, pulling over traffic, responding to the usual domestic calls, and dealing with whatever weird situations dispatch decides to throw at me. Not much happens here, and that leaves the local teenagers to get creative with how they spend their free time. Most of the town is made up of old, abandoned farmhouses, and every one of them is rumored to be haunted. As a result, we get plenty of calls about teens sneaking around these rundown properties, especially around Halloween, when the urge for a good scare seems to reach its peak. I guess the local corn maze and pumpkin patches just aren't enough for them anymore. But there's one place in particular that we always have to keep an eye on. Gittler's farm. Over the years, it's become somewhat of a local legend. I remember hearing stories about it when I was in middle school, and by the time I got to high school, I'd overheard plenty of classmates planning late-night trips to the farm to see if the rumors were true. The story goes like this. Back in the 1930s, the Gittler family lived on that farm, and they had 8 children. The weather back then was colder, with temperatures dropping to freezing by October. The second floor of their farmhouse was one large room where all the kids slept. The heat from their bodies helped keep the place warm enough, but on the coldest nights, Mr. Gittler would light a fire in the living room to keep them all warm. One particular October night, it was brutally cold. Mr. Gittler made sure to start a fire before everyone went to bed, but something went horribly wrong. Nobody really knows how or why, but the house caught on fire in the middle of the night. Mr. Gittler woke up to the sound of his children screaming. He tried to wake his wife, but the fire blocked their way out. They had no choice but to climb out of the window, but by the time they reached the front yard, it was too late. The fire had already claimed the lives of all 8 of their children. Years later, Mrs. Gittler, consumed by grief, hanged herself in the closet with a belt. Mr. Gittler lived on for a while longer, though, and eventually died alone at 45. The official cause of death was a heart attack, but rumors persist that he died of a broken heart, devastated by the loss of his wife and children. The original Gittler farm is nothing but a burnt-out foundation, swallowed by an overgrown field. Over the years, the land has changed owners multiple times, each new farmer using it for livestock. But the stories about the farm never went away. The old legend says that if you drive to where the farmhouse once stood and light a fire, the spirits of the children will appear and rush to put it out. As you can imagine, this urban legend has led to countless teenagers testing their courage, hoping to see something supernatural. The other night, I was on my shift when the first call of the season came through. "Dispatch to 112, the radio crackled. 112, go ahead, I replied, grabbing my pen. "We've got a report of teens trespassing at the old Gittler farm. A neighbor saw a car drive down the lane and onto the property. Can you check it out?" 10-4. I grabbed my bag of almonds and finished the last handful before getting into my cruiser. I made my way down the winding gravel lane, my spotlight cutting through the dark night. I wasn't surprised when I saw a car idling ahead, parked where the old farmhouse used to be. I pulled up behind it, parking my cruiser and stepping out. As I approached the car, I immediately noticed something strange. It was empty. The keys were still in the ignition, the engine was running, and the car was completely deserted. I stood for a moment, confused, when a heavy scent of smoke suddenly hit me in the chest. It was thick, so real that I could taste it. I turned around, scanning the area with my flashlight, but I couldn't see any fire. The smell lingered, nauseating in its intensity. I pulled my shirt up to cover my mouth and nose, then began walking toward the woods, hoping to catch sight of the kids who had been messing around. As I got closer to the trees, the smoke gradually began to fade, but still, no one was in sight. I stood still for a moment, listening. "Police, is anyone here? You're not in trouble, I just need you to leave," I called out. No answer. Thank God for the moonlight, though it barely made a dent in the blackness of the woods. I could hear the distant hoot of an owl and the steady chirping of crickets. But the eerie silence that followed only made me more uneasy. I turned back, deciding to head back to my cruiser. That's when I heard it. A scream. It wasn't just a scream, it was a high-pitched, blood-curdling shriek that ran straight up my spine and stopped my heart. My adrenaline surged, and without thinking, I sprinted toward the sound, my gear bouncing with every step. It came from the direction of my cruiser. I reached the car, scanning the area around it. I bent over and shined my flashlight through the window. Empty. I was about to straighten up when the scream came again. This time it was behind me, closer, and I was overwhelmed by that choking smell of smoke once more. I spun around, heart racing, and that's when I saw them. 2 girls, lying motionless on the ground, about 50 yards from the burned-out foundation of the original farmhouse. They were on the far side, near what remained of the building. I bolted toward them, my heart hammering in my chest. When I reached them, I dropped to my knees and checked on the first girl. Her skin was cold, her body limp. I checked for a pulse. Nothing. Panic shot through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I turned to the second girl. Her eyes were wide open, fixed on the sky, unblinking. I knelt beside her, assuring her that help was on the way. I had no idea what kind of drugs they'd taken, but it didn't matter. These girls needed help. I grabbed my radio, my hands still trembling as I spoke. 112 to dispatch. Dispatch, go ahead. I need an ambulance at my location for a possible overdose. 1 female is conscious but unresponsive, and the other has no pulse. I'm starting compressions now. Copy that, 112. We've got you starting compressions at 0310 hours. I positioned myself over the unconscious girl, straddling her to begin CPR. As I pressed down on her chest, I heard the unmistakable crack of cartilage giving way under my first compression. The sickening sound of her ribs breaking will haunt me forever. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I pushed down again and again until my arms burned with the effort, each compression feeling like it might be my last. For 3 long minutes, I worked relentlessly, desperate to keep her alive, even as every second felt like a lifetime. By the time the ambulance arrived, my muscles were screaming in pain, but I didn't care. I just wanted them to get her to the hospital in time. The paramedics took over and rushed both girls to the ambulance. I stood there, trying to catch my breath, my heart still racing. I didn't know what I was going to find out when I reported for my shift the next night. When I arrived at the station, I found out the news that made my stomach drop. The girl I had worked on, she didn't make it. Despite my best efforts, she was gone. I was devastated. I had tried so damn hard. The autopsy report came back and it only raised more questions. There were no drugs in her system. But her lungs were filled with smoke. Not smoke from a fire, but something else entirely. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I called the medical examiner's office, hoping to get some clarity. "Hey, it's Officer Barkley. Can you fill me in on what happened with the autopsy for the girl you got last night?" "Oh, hey, Barkley. I wasn't the one handling it, but I've read the report and talked to the team. The girl's lungs, they were burned, man. Filled with smoke, like it was as if you pulled her body straight out of a fire." I froze, my mind reeling. "That's impossible," I muttered. "There was no fire. There was nothing there when I arrived. No flames, no smoke, just those two girls." "I know, man," the investigator replied. "That's what's so strange. The burns in her lungs are consistent with inhaling smoke from a large fire. But there was no fire. None of it made sense. The smell of smoke I had encountered earlier, was it connected? And where the hell did the girls come from? They had been nowhere in sight when I first arrived at the scene. What had really happened that night? The more I thought about it, the more confused and disturbed I became. Something wasn't right, but I had no idea what it was. And for the first time, I wondered if the stories about the Gittler farm were more than just a legend. Here is the rephrased part of the fourth story. Before I was born, my parents grew up in the same suburban neighborhood where I spent my childhood. The year was 1993, and they were both around 12 or 13 years old. It was a scorching summer, and like many kids at that time, they spent most of their days outside. Reading comics or playing with toys inside was out of the question when the sun was blazing. My parents and their close friends, Nicole, Manny, and Lee, played together every summer, making memories they would later tell me about. That summer, the heat was unbearable. My mom recalls the group of them cooling off with water balloons and super soakers, drenched in sweat. Then, out of nowhere, Lee paused his play. He turned his head toward the street and saw a gleaming white ice cream truck slowly cruising down the block, the familiar tune of Mr. Softy ringing out. Immediately, a bunch of kids ran to it, waving $5 bills, eager to get their hands on ice cream, popsicles, or snow cones. As the others headed inside to ask their parents for money, Lee wandered off to grab some water. He looked up and noticed something strange. The truck, which had stopped for the children, was now starting to drive away. But there was no sign of the kids who had been there just moments ago. They were all gone, vanished. All that remained was the ice cream man, smiling at Lee as the truck began to pull away. The man's smile was wide and uncomfortably warm, but before Lee could process it, the truck's windows slammed shut, and the truck drove off, leaving the street eerily quiet. Lee stood frozen, staring at the empty space where the kids had been, the sounds of the ice cream truck's jingle fading into the distance. When my parents and their friends returned outside, they found Lee standing motionless, like he was in a trance. They called out to him, but he didn't answer. He only pointed silently in the direction the truck had gone. Later that night, the police were called in to investigate the mysterious disappearance of the children who had been at the truck. Lee, still shaken, only repeated one thing. It was the smiling ice cream man. The next few weeks passed without any sign of the missing children. Life continued normally for my parents and their friends, but Lee could never forget that day. He refused to go near any ice cream trucks, too terrified of what he'd seen. Then, in mid-August, as the end of summer approached, my parents and their friends were riding their bikes around the neighborhood when they heard the familiar jingle of Mr. Softy in the air. This time, everyone had their own money to buy ice cream from the truck. The hot, sticky humidity had everyone eager for something cold, and my dad remembers rushing to the truck with the others, eager to cool down. But Lee was hesitant. He knew something was off about that truck, but he followed his friends, keeping his distance. When they all lined up the truck's window, everything seemed normal. They got their ice cream, laughed, and chatted as they enjoyed the cold treat. But then, something happened that caught Lee's attention. He froze. The ice cream man, the same one from the day the kids had disappeared, had just dropped my mom's ice cream cone. He mumbled an apology, then quickly closed the window, clearly flustered. At that moment, Lee knew it was time to leave. Without wasting a second, he grabbed my dad by the arm and whispered urgently, "Robbie, we need to go. I've got ice cream at my house. Let's just leave this truck alone." His voice was low, and there was a terrified look in his eyes. My dad, though, just shrugged him off. He thought Lee was just being paranoid and told him to relax. Lee tried again, this time more desperately. "No, Robbie, you don't understand. This isn't like last time. We have to get out of here now." Then Lee told my dad everything, what happened the day the kids disappeared. Here's the next part of the rephrased story. You remember when I told you about the smiling ice cream man? Well, this is him. Lee whispered urgently to my dad, trying to keep his voice low so no one would hear. My dad, growing more worried, walked over to my mom, trying to pull her away from the truck. But they were too late. The ice cream man returned to the window, his voice too calm, too friendly. "Aren't you forgetting your ice cream?" he called out to my mom. She shrugged off my dad's arm, brushing past him and heading towards the window. What she didn't notice was the sprayer the ice cream man held in his other hand. In one smooth, practiced motion, he aimed it at my mom's face. Before anyone could react, before Manny, Nicole, or Lee could even move, they were all hit by the gas. The effects were almost immediate. There were fits of coughing, then one by one, they all collapsed to the ground, unconscious. When my parents came to, they were in a dark, dingy room, lit only by a flickering, weak light bulb. My dad was the first to regain consciousness. He quickly surveyed the room. Manny and Nicole were chained to the walls, their faces pale and strained. Lee was tied to a chair next to my mom. The sight of them, helpless and terrified, only made things worse. My dad's eyes widened as he took in the horror around him. The room wasn't empty. It was filled with the bodies of the missing children, their bodies horribly mutilated. Some had their throats slit, others had deep stab wounds in their faces, their insides exposed, and some had fingers missing. The room looked like something straight out of a nightmare. It was a gruesome, twisted scene that no child or anyone should ever witness. Panic gripped my dad as he struggled against his restraints, but quickly realized that his mouth was gagged and the ropes were too tight for him to break free. As he wrestled, he heard heavy footsteps coming down the stairs, the floorboards creaking with every step. They were coming closer. And then he saw him, the ice cream man. But this time, the man was different. The smile that had once seemed harmless was now a twisted, malicious grin. His eyes were dark, void of any emotion. The clean, white uniform he had once worn was gone, replaced with a blood-stained smock that looked like it had been painted with fresh blood. In his hand, he held a large hunting knife, polished and gleaming ominously in the dim light. He walked over to my mom, lifting her chin with a grotesque smile on his face. "I'm going to have some fun with you before I snuff out that pretty little light of yours," he said with a lecherous grin. My dad struggled harder against his restraints, but the ropes were too strong. He couldn't break free. The ice cream man turned to Lee next, his eyes narrowing in on him with an unsettling intensity. "You?" he sneered. "This could have been so much easier if you had just kept your mouth shut." The ice cream man's voice was low, dangerous, as he stepped toward Lee. Without warning, he swung his fist and punched Lee square in the cheek. My dad heard the sickening crack of Lee's cheekbone, followed by Lee's muffled grunts as he fought against his gag. Lee's face twisted in pain, tears welling in his eyes, but despite it all, he glared up at the man with defiance. The ice cream man laughed, his voice cruel and mocking. "You think you've got guts, kid? We'll see about that," he sneered. Then he walked over to Manny. With a sadistic grin, he ran the blade lightly across Manny's throat before holding it against the cloth gag. With a swift, cruel motion, the knife sliced through it. "Let's see if you're as tough as your friend here," the ice cream man taunted. He pressed the knife lightly to Manny's cheek, drawing a thin line of blood. Manny, despite his fear, screamed, "Fuck you! Help us! We're trapped in here! Help!" The ice cream man's laughter filled the room, twisted and dark. "You can scream all you want," he said coldly. "No one will hear you. No one at all." In a desperate fit of rage, Manny headbutted the man in the nose with all the strength he could muster. The ice cream man stumbled back, surprised, as blood began to pour from his nostrils. Here's the next part of the rephrased story. The man staggered back, clutching his bleeding nose. My dad couldn't help but notice the change in his eyes. There was something darker, more sinister behind them now. A malevolent contempt replaced the friendly glint he had earlier. A tense, awkward silence settled over the room. The man stared at Manny with an empty, soulless gaze before slowly breaking into that same creepy, forced smile that had haunted them hours ago. And then, without warning, he lunged. In a flash, the ice cream man stabbed Manny in the stomach. My dad struggled harder against the ropes, trying to reach them, but the knots were too tight. His heart sank as he watched in horror, helpless, as the ice cream man brutally gutted Manny. He stabbed him again and again, across his chest, his face, even his head, until the room was a grotesque mess of blood and flesh. The ice cream man's smile never wavered as he smeared Manny's blood across his own face, exhaling in satisfaction. Then, without skipping a beat, he turned and walked to a nearby cabinet. He pulled out a scalpel with a deliberate, unnerving slowness, and my dad could feel the panic rising in his chest. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the room, his movements almost methodical as he approached Nicole. The thuds of his boots were the only sound as Lee and my parents stared in despair. The ice cream man held the scalpel over Nicole's left eye, brushing a lock of hair from her face. My dad's breath caught in his throat as the blade hovered inches from her pupil. "Your eyes." The man's voice trembled with excitement, his breathing becoming erratic. Nicole, terrified, tried to shake her head, but it was useless. The ice cream man's grip on her head was iron tight, forcing her to look directly into his eyes. His smile grew wider, more manic. "They just look so pure, so full of hope," he murmured, almost reverently, before glancing over at Lee. "You still got guts, kid?" Before anyone could react, the scalpel pierced Nicole's eye. She screamed, her voice raw with agony, as the ice cream man dug deeper, enjoying every moment of her torment. He yanked off her gag, letting her cries fill the room, each one more primal and disturbing than the last. My dad fought desperately against his restraints, trying to help, but nothing worked. He could hear footsteps coming down the stairs again, growing louder and faster. His heart skipped a beat when he realized someone was coming. Thanks to the street cameras, the police had been alerted. They arrived at the house, weapons drawn, and headed straight for the basement. There, they found the ice cream man still torturing Nicole. He looked up at them, his eyes gleaming with twisted pleasure as he held the scalpel in his bloodied hand. The officers shouted at him to put his hands up, but the ice cream man simply walked toward them, undeterred. My dad could hear the gunshots, each one ringing out in quick succession, but the man didn't fall. He kept moving, even as the bullets struck his body. He raised the hunting knife, a sick smile spreading across his face, and seemed to relish the pain. It wasn't until a shot rang out and hit him in the head that he finally dropped. The ice cream man fell to the ground, lifeless, never to move again. Time passed, and life slowly returned to some semblance of normalcy, but my parents, along with Lee and Nicole, were never the same. They never fully recovered from that night, and their fear for Malcolm and me grew. They still believed the neighborhood wasn't safe, even after all these years. I wish I could tell you they were wrong, but I can't. The legend, though, it still holds true to this day. Here's how it goes. Every summer, after the incident, you can hear the Mr. Softy jingle ringing through the neighborhood in the dead of night. It starts off faint, then gradually grows louder, no matter how hard you try to ignore it. If you look out the window to see where the sound is coming from, you'll spot the ice cream truck lurking in the shadows. And if you look into the figure's red eyes, you'll feel yourself compelled to walk toward the truck. And before you know it, you'll vanish, just like the kids who disappeared all those years ago. Malcolm and I didn't believe the legend at first. It sounded too far-fetched. but over time, things started to make sense. After the incident, several kids went missing, all of them apparently sneaking out. There were no signs of a struggle. Some of the kids even had mental illnesses or psychosis, making it hard to believe it was anything other than a tragedy that happened to them. But when a boy snapped out of his trance one night, he looked around, terrified, asking if the song had stopped. That's when it hit me. Malcolm and I talked about it one night over the phone, and I could hear the fear in his voice. What if we start hearing that jingle? My mom lost her eyebrow. I don't want to end up like that man. I reassured him, telling him that the man who did all of it was long gone, dead. I promised him nothing would happen to him because we literally lived right across the street from each other. If anything weird happened, he could call me. We both tried to put our fears aside and went to bed. That night, I had a dream. I was walking down some steps, heading toward a dim light. There was an awful smell in the air, something decaying. When I reached the bottom, the light brightened, revealing a gruesome sight. The basement was filled with the dismembered bodies of kids. I fought the urge to throw up as I scanned the room. And then I saw him, the ice cream man, sitting at the back of the room, sharpening his knife. He stopped, slowly turning his head to meet my eyes. That same sickening grin spread across his face. And then he lunged at me. I put my hands up to defend myself, but just as his knife was about to strike, I woke up. I gasped for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. Stupid fucking story, I muttered, trying to calm myself down. I pulled the covers over me and grabbed my phone, hoping a bit of YouTube would help ease my mind. I unlocked my phone, but as soon as I did, I heard it. The unmistakable jingle of an ice cream truck. It was faint at first, but it was getting louder and louder. Turns out, the legend was true after all. My grandmother is from a remote desert town in Mexico, a place she refuses to name, even to this day. She tells my cousins and me that the town's name is something best left unspoken, for fear of the darkness it harbors. As children, my cousins and I would always shudder at her stories, though she never told us much, only fragments, unsettling whispers of a past long buried. One tale, however, she swears is true, an urban legend passed down through the years, one she claims to have heard directly from a church official in her youth. It's a tale that haunts her to this day, and it's all she's ever revealed about her hometown. The legend centers on a convent, long abandoned and now nothing more than a crumbling relic of Mexico's Catholic past. In the early 1970s, a group of nuns brought a boy into the convent, a boy they called Pietro. Why they chose that name remains a mystery, as does the boy himself. Pietro's arrival was shrouded in confusion, a strange event that would become the subject of whispered conversations for years. The first time the town saw him, he was wandering the desert in rags with a pack of coyotes trailing behind him, silent as shadows. The boy, no older than 8 or 9, spun in endless circles, crying out in Italian, "Dove mia madre?" Where is my mother? In a tiny, isolated town in Mexico, Italian was hardly a common language. The only person who might have understood him was the head nun at the local convent, a woman fluent in Italian, Latin, French, English, and Spanish. It was she who, along with a group of nuns, ventured out to find him. They discovered him alone in the desert, gaunt and wild-eyed, his clothes tattered, skin weathered and burned by the harsh sun. The nuns brought him back to town, where the boy was placed under their care. From the start, Pietro was a mystery. He spoke little, his only words a constant refrain. "Dove mia madre?" He would wander the convent, his face locked in a scowl, his eyes dark and penetrating. The nuns were baffled, unable to communicate with him in a way that would shed any light on his past or his origins. The head nun, however, soon discovered something far more unsettling. Pietro was fluent not just in Italian, but in 4 other languages. As the days passed, the boy would casually sing nursery rhymes in French, English, and Spanish, his voice hauntingly melodic. It was in Latin, though, that the nun was most disturbed. Pietro was caught numerous times in the convent's halls, quietly reciting prayers in Latin, prayers that seemed oddly foreign, as if they were not of Christian origin. As troubling as his linguistic abilities were, it wasn't just the languages that unsettled the nuns, it was the boy's presence. He seemed to carry something dark with him, an energy that left the nuns feeling uneasy. His refusal to speak about his past, his constant cry of "Dove mia madre," felt like a plea, but it was also a demand, as though his past was an unspoken curse that followed him. The head nun, however, saw something different. She became convinced that Pietro was no mere lost boy, but a blessing from God, sent to the convent as a reward for the nun's unwavering faith. Despite the strange air around him, despite his unsettling behavior, the head nun insisted they keep him, raise him in the name of God. But the nuns soon discovered that Pietro's presence in the convent was far more than a simple mystery. It was a darkness, a shadow that had settled over the small town, creeping into the lives of all who lived there. At night, when the convent should have been silent, Pietro's voice would drift through the halls from his small room beside the kitchen. The boy, who spoke mostly in Italian, would sing the French folk song Au clair de la lune repeatedly, his voice hauntingly soft and distant. He would continue until around 3 a.m., when everything would fall silent, and the lights in his room would abruptly go out. None of the nuns, except the head nun, dared enter his room. The other 7, lower-ranking nuns, grew increasingly unsettled by his presence. There was something unnatural about him. His unsettling gaze would follow them during prayers, and though he refused to convert to Catholicism, he would recite their Latin prayers fluently, and sometimes he spoke in a language they did not recognize. The head nun, the most learned of them all, speculated that the strange language might be an ancient form of Coptic, but it was far too difficult to decipher. As time passed, the fear among the nuns grew. His presence weighed on them like a dark cloud, and one night, 3 of the braver nuns decided they had had enough. This child, they felt, was no blessing. He was a curse, bringing only fear and discomfort. Together, they crept through the kitchen and made their way down the dim hallway toward his room, guided by the flickering candlelight beneath the door and the faint sound of his singing. As they approached, the song grew louder, and the light seemed to intensify, flickering wildly beneath the door as though a fire burned within. The first nun reached the door, her breath shallow, her heart pounding. She turned to her sisters, their faces pale with fear, before slowly pushing the door open. As the door creaked, the singing ceased in an instant, and the candlelight vanished, replaced by an eerie, unnatural stillness. A low, childlike chuckling echoed through the room. The moonlight that streamed through the window illuminated the room, casting long, dark shadows on the walls. The nuns, trembling, looked around the room, but the boy was nowhere to be seen. That was when one of the nuns spotted something beneath the bed, a pair of small, gleaming eyes watching them. A sharp yelp escaped one of them as she froze in terror. The boy remained hidden, his eyes the only part of him visible, his smile unsettling and unnatural as he chuckled softly. Then, in the sweetest, most unnerving tone, he asked, "Dove mia madre?" The nuns huddled together, and one of them, her voice shaking, responded in Spanish, "Your mother is not here, but we will take you to her, if you like." That was the last they would ever see of those 3 nuns. The next morning, they were gone, having left with the boy into the desert, their footsteps swallowed by the vast emptiness, never to return. Years passed, and the town around the convent grew, but the shadow of that night lingered. The convent was abandoned by the church, and the guilt of the head nun weighed heavily on her. She knew her decision to keep the boy had led to the disappearance, and perhaps the deaths of her sisters. Overcome by the weight of her conscience, the old head nun eventually took her own life. In the late 1980s, the only payphone in the town began to ring incessantly between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. If someone dared answer it, they would hear a small, eerie chuckle, followed by the question, "Dove mia madre?" Before the line went dead, it became a local oddity, with curious tourists and thrill-seekers flocking to the town. But by the mid-90s, the town was plagued by gang violence, corruption spilling out from the nearby cities. The payphone was eventually removed, and the calls ceased, though the mystery surrounding them remained. Then, one night in the mid-90s, 3 local children decided to explore the old convent. While playing near the crumbling building, one of them spotted a red thread hanging from the bottom of a window sill. Intrigued, they tugged at it, and to their surprise, the thread stretched endlessly, winding out of the convent and into the desert. The boys followed it, pulling it from the earth as it seemed to never end, until they reached a towering sand dune. At the crest of the hill, they tugged one last time, pulling the thread free. The sand cascaded down the hill, and after a moment, something revealed itself. An ancient stone structure. As the sand settled, a mausoleum slowly came into view, standing alone in the desert, an eerie relic of the past. The boys stood frozen, staring at the mausoleum, unsure of what they had just uncovered. It was as though the desert had been hiding its secret for years, waiting for someone to unearth it. No one knew who or what lay buried within. But from that moment on, the air around the convent seemed to grow heavier, as if the darkness that had haunted it had found a new home. The boys stood frozen before the mausoleum, their eyes wide with terror. The heavy door, which had been concealed by layers of sand, now gaped open before them, as if inviting them into its dark depths. The air was suffocating, thick with a sense of foreboding. The little sunlight that managed to seep into the mausoleum illuminated the ghastly sight inside. At the center of the room, on the cold stone floor, lay 3 corpses, their bodies positioned in an unnerving, almost reverential way. They were face down, their arms stretched outward in a prostrating pose, as though they had bowed before something or someone. Their clothing was tattered, their flesh gray and decayed, but their posture remained eerily intact. At the far end of the mausoleum, a stone throne loomed, an unsettling contrast to the surrounding decay. Seated on the throne was a large corpse, draped in a long, tattered velvet dress of deep red, faded with time and wear. The body, though long dead, seemed to hold an unnatural dignity. A gold crown sat atop its skull, and emerald necklaces hung loosely around its neck, their once vibrant green now dulled. Ruby rings adorned its fingers, some so encrusted with dirt and grime that they appeared more like forgotten relics of a long-lost kingdom. In the lap of the regal corpse sat a smaller figure, a child's body, equally lifeless but clothed in rags that had long since lost their color. The child's tiny hand clutched the end of the same red thread the boys had followed all the way into the desert. The thread seemed to emanate from the child's grip, trailing back toward the boys, as if beckoning them closer. Suddenly, the silence of the mausoleum was shattered by a soft, childlike voice, echoing from within the darkness. It spoke in Italian, its words both haunting and perplexing. Dove è tua madre? Where is your mother? The boys gasped, their blood running cold. Every instinct screamed at them to run, to flee from the impossible scene before them. With fear tightening their chests, they turned and bolted from the mausoleum, not daring to look back. The desert wind rushed in their ears, and the thread they had followed for so long seemed to pull them back toward the town, away from the cursed monument. Once safely away, they told the local authorities what they had seen, but their reports were met with skepticism. The police sent a few men to investigate, but when they arrived, the mausoleum had vanished, leaving no trace behind except for the strange red thread that led nowhere. Despite several attempts, the boys could never find the mausoleum again, at least not without the string. The thread, as it turned out, was the only guide to the location, and without it, the boys were left to wander the desert in vain. The legend grew over the years, becoming a tale whispered in hushed voices around campfires, a warning for the curious and the brave. My grandmother, with her knack for weaving suspense into every word, would tell the story in Spanish, her voice lowering, her tone almost reverent, as if she had personally seen the horrors of the mausoleum. It was one of those tales that, once heard, would never quite leave you. It would follow you, like the red thread winding its way into your thoughts, no matter how far you tried to escape it. The elders of the small Mexican town still speak of it in dark tones, their eyes wary. They warn anyone who passes through their desert town, if you ever come across a piece of red thread trailing out of nowhere, do not follow it. Never, ever follow it. And so the story lives on, a chilling reminder that some things in this world are better left undisturbed, buried in the sand where they belong. The autumn days passed by slowly. The trees stood bare, their leaves scattered across the ground, the branches swaying gently in the soft breeze. I don't have much time left before it finds me, so I need to make this quick. And if you happen to be reading this, please finish it. Maybe you'll understand the warning in time to stop it, or at least prepare yourself. Yesterday, my neighbor Mary held a garage sale. She was selling nearly everything she owned: furniture, clothes, books, all because she was moving away to live with her sister. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, just a typical sale, but the whole atmosphere was oddly depressing. I'd known Mary for nearly 5 years, and seeing her go was painful. But, given everything she'd gone through last year, it seemed inevitable. Last October, Mary lost her son and her husband. The whole town was talking about it. It made headlines even. A pair of burglars broke into her house and murdered both of them. The police were involved, of course, but despite all their efforts, the case ended with no answers, just a cold file. Nothing ever came of it. Mary, understandably, wanted to leave it all behind. She wanted to forget about the horror, the pain, and start fresh somewhere else. I respected her decision. I even thought it was probably the best thing for her. Her yard was overrun with people, most of them strangers I didn't recognize. Some of them probably homeless. A lot of the items she was selling were dirt cheap. Honestly, I was surprised she wasn't just giving things away. She only asked a few bucks for each item. I browsed the cluttered lawn, looking for something that might be worth my time, but most of the good stuff had already been snatched up. At one table, I spotted an old Sony Handycam. I picked it up, dusted it off, and was surprised to find that it still worked. "You found something, haven't you?" I turned to see Mary standing behind me. She wore a smile, but there was a hollowness behind her eyes. "Well, it's a good deal, so I can't complain." "Hey, you don't have to pay for that. I'm practically giving everything away." I shook my head. "It's fine. I want to help you out a bit." She smiled weakly, then turned and walked off to attend to other customers. Seeing her like that, so broken, was heartbreaking. If those burglars had picked a different house that night, I imagine Mary would have been like any other mother, getting her son ready for school, planning her day, living the life she always dreamed of. A life with a loving husband, a happy child, and a home full of warmth. But not all dreams come true. I continued to scan the tables, my eyes landing on a large suitcase. It was oddly out of place among the rest of the items, so I walked over to inspect it. It felt heavy, at least 50 kilograms. Curious, I decided to take it along with the camera. When I reached the makeshift counter, I set both items down. The table was cluttered with bills and coins, and I waited for Mary, who was running from table to table helping customers. When she finally arrived, I placed the suitcase and camera in front of her. "So, how much do I owe you?" She looked at the items, her gaze distant. "It's $10 for everything, but..." I interrupted her and handed her the money before she could say anything more. I grabbed the camera and suitcase, ready to head home, but before I left, I couldn't help but ask one more thing. "Hey, the suitcase is pretty heavy. Are you sure you don't need anything out of it?" Mary's face hardened. She didn't look at me, just stared at the ground. "No, it's just old documents. I don't need them anymore." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? It seems off, like there's something else in there." Her voice became firm, more forceful than I'd ever heard it. "No, just take it. Please, I don't want it anymore." Her words stung, but I didn't push it. It was clear she was trying to unload everything she had as quickly as possible. "All right, I'm sorry. I just thought, well, never mind." I took the items and left. "All right then, I guess this is it. Goodbye, huh?" I gave her a small smile and waved as I walked away. From a distance, I watched Mary slowly begin to pack up the remnants of her garage sale. Almost everything had been sold, and she must have made at least $200 from it. I went home and sat down, feeling the weight of the silence in my house. I flipped through the TV channels absently, but nothing could keep my mind from drifting back to Mary's departure. We'd been best friends in college and lived close to each other since we were 18. Now she was moving across the state. I was happy for her, truly. She was finally escaping the weight of the depression she'd been carrying. But still, I worried about her. She was so naive, so vulnerable. I didn't want her to face any more heartache. I turned off the TV, the rain outside tapping against the windows. My house was often quiet, peaceful even. But tonight, the silence felt unsettling. It was as though something was watching me. My eyes wandered to the camera sitting next to me on the couch. On a whim, I decided to open it and check out the quality of the videos. The camera looked ancient, dust caked on its surface and a spider web covering the lens. When I tried to view the footage, I could immediately tell the video quality was terrible, grainy, almost like an old film. I couldn't even tell if the lens was open or closed. What had I expected? A cheap Sony camera, bought for a few bucks, was hardly going to be in working condition. But I figured I'd keep it. Maybe it would come in handy for some impromptu trips. Before I could do that, though, I needed to make sure there was nothing else on it. I clicked through some buttons, eventually landing on the gallery tab. The photos and videos it contained were dated back to 2007, with the last video recorded in October 2021, the same month Matthew, Mary's son, had passed. I didn't want to watch those videos, but I had to. It was impossible to ignore. Matthew's death had shocked the entire neighborhood. He was a sweet, kind kid, always helping out the elderly, walking them to their cars and offering to carry their groceries. I used to drive him to school before I started working full-time. I just wanted to see something, anything, from before everything had gone wrong. So I opened the first video, May 2007. It was a video of Matthew's birthday. Seeing Mary and her son so full of life and joy was bittersweet. I couldn't imagine her ever being that happy again, not after everything that had happened. I watched through all the other videos. It was painful, and there were times when I had to pause to wipe away my tears. The footage was a reminder of what had been lost, and I could feel the weight of it all in my chest. After about an hour, I finally reached the videos from October 2021. My hands trembled as I clicked on the first one. A loading icon spun on the screen for what felt like an eternity, and when the video finally started, I was bracing myself for something hard to watch. Video 1, October 28, 2021. The video began differently. At first, everything was completely black, and I couldn't make out a single shape. I thought maybe Mary had forgotten to open the lens, but then I noticed something. In the darkness, there was a figure standing in front of the camera. It almost resembled a human, but it was difficult to tell for sure in the dimness. Then, a voice. It was Matthew's voice. The video began to brighten slowly, and as the image became clearer, I saw the figure standing there more distinctly. Something about the whole scene felt wrong. It wasn't just the poor quality of the video, it was the tension in the air, like something was about to happen. I could feel my heart rate pick up as the scene unfolded. Okay, yeah, I think it's pretty clear now. Matthew sighed heavily. Man, October's almost over already. I guess time flies when you don't have any tests to worry about. He chuckled softly, but there was a tension in his voice, like he was forcing himself to sound casual. Why am I even doing this? This was a dumb idea. If anyone's watching this, you should probably stop. It's just going to be a bunch of me talking to the camera. Honestly, my mom shouldn't have even given me this thing. He paused, holding the camera in his hands as though he was about to turn it off, but instead, he put it back on the bed. His face was barely visible on screen. I don't really have much to say, but today, my friends and I found this weird diary. Well, Daniel found it and he showed us. It was strange. The handwriting was like scribbles with little descriptions, and I thought I was bad at drawing. I glanced at the clock. It was getting late, but I couldn't stop watching. I had to see this through. The diary was about some kind of entity, an urban legend, I think. I don't know much about it, but it was called the Mimic. Yeah, I know it sounds stupid, and honestly, it probably is, but I'm not lying. I don't know what it is, just that it exists, and I probably shouldn't have read any more of it. I was surprised Matthew had never mentioned this to me before. But then again, he was a teenager. They don't always tell you everything. The stuff in the diary was messed up. I shouldn't have even read it, honestly. I don't think it's real, but just reading it, it felt wrong. There was a sketch of a woman, her baby ripped out of her stomach, and it was being eaten by this thing. There were red marks all over the sketch, and it was all messed up. God, I sound like an idiot. All right, that's enough for today. He grabbed the camera again, ending the video abruptly. That was the end of the first video. There were 3 more left, but I can't keep writing them right now. I need to get out of here before it finds me. I don't have much time. It might already be following me. I keep seeing something in the corner of my eye, or maybe it's just my mind playing tricks. I don't know. I'll try to write about the rest of the videos in the next few days. Last night was horrible. I kept seeing it in the shadows, in my dreams. It chased me, taunted me. I'm crossing the state right now, hoping it will stop following me. Maybe all of this is just a fever dream. But if you ever find a video or a photo of the mimic, or even a sketch of it, don't look at it. No matter what, don't look at it. Forget everything I said earlier. There is no solution, and even if there is one, it's not worth the risk. Before anything happens to me, I need to tell everyone the truth. I need to tell everyone what really happened to Matthew that night. Video 2, October 28th, 2021. The video started the same way as the first one, blurry, out of focus. But this time, Matthew didn't waste any time before speaking. It's true, I saw it. His voice was quiet, shaky. He sounded genuinely frightened. There was a long pause, as if he was struggling to find the right words. Today was Mike's birthday. I went to his party, and we played video games for most of the day. It was nice. It helped me take my mind off that thing we found yesterday. But for most of the day, Frank just sat there watching us play, so I asked if he could get me a glass of Coke. He didn't really say anything, just kinda walked off. He sighed deeply, as if the weight of the day was starting to take its toll on him. When Frank came back and handed me the glass, I saw something. It was behind him, hiding, like it was trying not to be noticed. I could only make out its face. I think it was grinning, but I'm not sure. And when I blinked, it was gone. I told Frank, but he just laughed at me and told me to get some rest. Matthew's voice faltered as he continued. I don't know. Maybe he's right. Maybe I just need to get some sleep. Maybe this will all go away. But what if it doesn't? What if it doesn't stop following me? I feel like I'm losing my mind. He looked directly at the camera for the first time, his eyes wide with fear. Listen, if you're watching this, don't try to learn anything about this thing. Don't go looking for it. I think it's better if you just stop now. If I make more videos, don't watch them. If you find this camera, throw it away. Destroy it. Don't let anyone else know about the mimic. I could never have written this story if I just followed what Matthew said, and I might never have learned what was in the last 3 videos. But I couldn't let his death go unchallenged. He wasn't murdered by burglars that night. Something else happened, and maybe, just maybe, I can bring him back. Maybe he's still alive, and if he is, I can destroy the mimic once and for all. Alright, I think that's enough for today. Matthew grabbed the camera and ended the video. Video 3. October 29th, 2021. The video started out just as blurry as the others, and I could barely see Matthew's face, lit only by a small tube light in his room. I'm not crazy, he said, his voice sounding shaky. But now, I wish I was. He took a deep breath before continuing, his words carrying a weight of something terrifying. I've seen it everywhere, all around me. I can see it right now, hiding in the shadows. It's there, lurking. When I'm on my bed trying to sleep, that's when it comes out. That's the only time I see its face clearly. At the party, I couldn't really make it out, but now, I see it clearly. It looks like a human, but everything about its face is wrong. It's completely black, its eyes are huge and colorless, its teeth are sharp, and it's not grinning anymore. It's laughing, like it's won. The fear in his voice deepened, and my heart pounded in my chest as I waited for him to continue. We all met today, at Frank's house. It wasn't the same. We're just teenagers, and we're all terrified. We couldn't tell any adults. They wouldn't believe us. He set the camera down for a moment and walked to the window. If we hadn't found that diary, we'd still just be playing video games, you know? I thought the mimic would only go after me because I kept thinking about it, but now all my friends see it too. If you're still watching this, just stop. Please, I'm begging you. I don't want anyone else to suffer like we have. He walked back to the camera, tears streaming down his face. His eyes were wide with fear. This video wasn't meant for you. It was for me. My mom said that talking about it would help me with my depression, so I just wanted to talk it out. I didn't want it to end with something following me everywhere. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow, if I'm still alive. The video cut off. This video wasn't meant for me, or anyone. Matthew never wanted anyone to see it. If anyone did, he begged them to stop. I should have respected his privacy, but I didn't. I needed to know what happened to him. What if he didn't die? When the police found him, he had been disemboweled. They never identified the body, but they assumed it was Matthew's because Mary said so. But what if she was wrong? What if Matthew had survived somehow? I had to know the truth. I needed Mary to know what happened that night. If Matthew was alive, maybe her husband was too. I pressed play on the next video as fast as I could. Video 4. October 30th, 2021. The video began just like the others. It was one of the last videos, and Matthew was sitting now, rather than lying on his bed. He stared into the camera with a weary expression. God, how did I even get here? A damn diary ruined our lives. As he spoke, I noticed something in the shadows behind him. I could barely make it out, but it looked like two round, glowing objects peering out from the dark. I thought it was just the camera failing to focus. The rest of the diary was unreadable. It was just scribbles, and the handwriting was different. Muhammad took it home. His grandfather could read the language it was written in. His grandfather translated it and told Muhammad what he found. Back in the 4th century, there was this entity that roamed a town, killing anyone who saw it. It would mimic the people it killed, luring more victims by imitating their loved ones. Eventually, it became... The entity had once been sealed by a group of monks in a glass jar, saving the townspeople. But centuries ago, the jar broke and the entity escaped. The town it once haunted is now the town I live in. The diary had instructions on how to seal it again, but the pages were stained with a red pigment, rendering them unreadable. Matthew sighed deeply, as if all hope had vanished, and his voice grew resigned. The only way to avoid it is to never look at a photo, video, or drawing of it. We saw a drawing of it in the diary, so it latched onto us. If you ever find this diary, burn it. He held the diary up to the camera. It was old, worn, and rugged. A miracle it was still intact. We're all going to die, he said, his voice shaking. But we had to try to stop it. I put salt all around the house, held a cross in front of it, and tried reading Bible verses. It didn't move. It just stood there in the shadows, smiling at me. I don't think there's any hope anymore. You can't undo your actions. I'm warning you. This was never meant to be discovered by us, but we came across it by accident. He broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. If anything happens to me and you're watching this, please tell my mom I love her. I really do. And tell her I'm sorry. He pressed his hand over the camera, and the video ended. Video 5, October 31st, 2021. The video began with Matthew's face, his eyes wide with fear. He was hiding. The dim yellow glow from the tube light in his room cast shadows across his face. He was crouched under his bed, peering through the narrow gap between the door and the wall, listening intently. I could hear the sounds of dishes crashing, followed by eerie shrieks from downstairs. It wasn't until 5 minutes into the video that he finally spoke. It came inside. He remained silent for several minutes. All I could hear were his sobs and occasional mutterings, though nothing was clear. Eventually, the noises from the other room faded, and Matthew gained the courage to stand. He quietly opened his bedroom door, and through the camera, I saw nothing but his house. It looked normal. The camera was blurry, but it focused after a few seconds, and that's when I saw it. I saw the mimic. It was standing at the far end of the kitchen, its back to the camera. It was at least 6 feet tall, completely black, with a human-shaped body, but somehow unreal. Broken plates and cutlery covered the floor. Silence filled the air, but then I heard a noise. It was laughing maniacally, its head jerking unnaturally. Then it stopped. The silence returned. I've been waiting a long time, Matthew. My heart stopped. The mimic's head twisted at a horrifying 180-degree angle. Its face was a twisted mess, black as night, with red pigment smeared around its mouth and sharp teeth visible through its grin. Matthew ran for his life, and the sound of its footsteps pounding against the floor echoed as it chased him through the house. He darted through the rooms, crashing into tables and knocking things over in his frantic flight. He barely managed to escape, but it was still right behind him. He rushed into his parents' room and slammed the door behind him. Matthew turned the camera towards the bed, where his parents lay motionless. The room was dark, and the camera barely picked up anything. He pulled back the blanket from his dad's face. There was blood everywhere, and his throat had been slit. Matthew stifled a scream as he stared at his mom, still under the sheets. He fled the room, terrified his mom had met the same fate. He ran back to his own room and locked the door. He returned to his hiding spot, sobbing uncontrollably, trying to be as quiet as possible, but it was impossible to hold back the emotions. I just want to wake up. Please, please let me wake up. He stayed there, hiding under the bed for what felt like forever. Then he reached for his phone, which lay on the floor in front of him. He dialed his friends, but they didn't answer. Despair settled over him. I think it got to them before me. They're all dead, and it's all because we read that stupid diary. Rage and hopelessness mixed in his voice. He'd lost his friends, his father, and now he was about to meet the same fate. He put his phone in his pocket and let out a tired sigh. I hope I can just sleep and never wake up. He stayed there, curled up under the bed, until he heard something. Footsteps. Something was moving closer to his room. He held his breath, trying to remain silent. The shuffling grew louder as whatever it was checked each room. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed as his door was broken open, followed by the sound of heavy breathing. "Matthew, where are you?" It was his mom's voice. The concern and love in her tone were clear. She began searching the room, opening the closet door, looking desperately for him. Matthew stayed hidden under the bed, silent as death. He knew it was his mom, but something inside him, something held him back. Matthew accidentally let out a breath, and instantly, Mary froze. She stood still for a moment, her body rigid. Then she slowly walked toward the bed, standing right in front of it. The camera, held in Matthew's trembling hands, could only capture her feet, the rest of her body obscured by shadows. In a panic, Matthew tried to move, crawling to the other side of the room, away from his mother's presence. For a few seconds, Mary remained still. Then, I heard something horrific. A loud crack, like bones breaking. Her body contorted, hunched over unnaturally, and her head snapped to an impossible angle. She was staring into the camera, a grotesque grin stretched across her face. "I've been trying to find you, Matthew." It was the mimic. Matthew screamed, his voice raw with terror. The creature lunged at him, its movements fast and relentless. "No, please, fool." The camera was hit, and the video cut to black. I sat up from the couch, the reality of everything starting to settle in. None of it felt real anymore. I wanted to believe this was all a nightmare, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. This was happening. The idea of a burglary seemed absurd now. I tried to piece things together, but the logic didn't hold up. How could this be explained? Nothing made sense. I stumbled toward the suitcase sitting on the table, my hands shaking. My heart pounded as I found the zipper and slowly opened it. Inside were several plastic bags, sealed at both ends, each one stained with red liquid. Hesitantly, I grabbed the first bag. The contents were hard to make out at first. I turned it over, trying to get a better look. What I saw made my stomach drop. It was hair, long dark hair, but something was hidden underneath it. My fingers trembled as I moved the hair aside, and when I finally saw what was beneath, I froze in horror. It was Mary's head. The room spun, and I stumbled to the sink, vomiting violently for what felt like forever. I couldn't process what I was seeing. How could this be real? Just hours ago, I had spoken to Mary, and now I was staring at her severed head. I forced myself to return to the suitcase, to face the nightmare that awaited me. All of the bags contained parts of her body. The mimic had killed her and her family. It had massacred them, dismembering them, all while posing as Mary. I tried to steady myself, to make sense of it all, but nothing made sense. I couldn't think straight. It felt like my mind was shattering under the weight of what I had just discovered. Then, I glanced at the clock, and for a brief moment, I saw something in the corner of my eye. A shadow. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but after everything I'd witnessed, I wasn't so sure anymore. I forced myself to put the bag containing Mary's head back in the suitcase and shut it tight. I grabbed the camera, intending to destroy it. I moved to the sink, placing it inside, and poured alcohol all over it. Then I took a lighter from my pocket and set it alight, watching as it burned, the flames licking the plastic and metal. I had to get out. Before the police could find the body, before the mimic found me, I had to leave. I packed up everything I could, determined to escape. I made my way toward the front door, ready to flee the nightmare. But then, I heard a voice behind me. "Are you leaving me here?" I whipped around, but there was nothing. Nothing but empty air. The house was silent. I was losing it. I could feel it. the madness creeping in. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let the mimic win. I had to escape. If I could just get out of the city, maybe the mimic wouldn't follow me. Maybe I could survive and warn others about it. I don't know if I'm going to survive, but if I do, I'll make sure everyone knows what happened to Matthew. I won't let the mimic win. Not this time. Looking back at my childhood, I realized that from the age of 8 to 14, I was a magnet for all things dark and supernatural. Ghosts, entities, demons, whatever it was, they seemed to find me. But tonight, or whatever time it is as you read this, I'll share with you a chilling urban legend that comes from where I grew up. It's called Calling Them. Before I dive into my own experience, let me give you some context. This legend was well known in my area, and the rules were simple, but they were not to be taken lightly. The core belief behind the legend is that if there's such a thing as a guardian angel, there's always a counterpart, a demon. It's said that everyone has at least one demon that follows them everywhere. These fallen entities are responsible for all the bad things that happen in your life, the accidents, the misfortune, the general misery. The demon and the angel, light and fire, are always by your side. And when your time comes, they're the ones who will report to the keeper of purgatory whether your soul deserves eternal peace or eternal torment. But the interesting part of this story is the ritual. There's a way to summon these entities, though they can never meet at the same time. Only one of them will answer your call. You'll never know which one it will be. Here's how it works. Rules of the ritual. 1. You'll need a match or a candle and a closet large enough for you to fit inside. 2. Bring a friend or two. They'll need to watch over you during the ritual. 3. Step into the closet. Once inside, close the door, leaving only you in the dark. 4. Light the match or candle. This begins the ritual. 5. The closet must be pitch black. The only light should come from the match or candle in your hand. 6. Chant aloud. I know you're here, don't want you to disappear, but I do have a single plea, may you show yourself to me. 7. After a few chants, you'll start hearing voices, whispers from the dark. 8. Keep chanting. 9. You'll begin to feel a presence, a force closing in around you in the dark. 10. Suddenly, someone will blow your light out. 11. Do not panic. Panic will make you vulnerable to the demon's deceptive powers. If you show fear, you risk becoming prey. Illusions will follow. The demon will try to trick you, to break you. It will attempt to kill you using fear and deception. 13. The only escape. Knock on the closet door. Your friends should open it. But be warned, this game is not for the faint of heart. You play at your own risk. I was 12 years old, and of course I was drawn to these things. I was at that age where I thought I knew everything, where I believed that nothing could hurt me, and that urban legends were just stories, no different than fairy tales. Even though I'd already encountered something real and terrifying, for some reason, I couldn't resist the temptation. I just had to try it. The title Calling Them was so cheesy, it sounded like something dreamed up by someone who had nothing better to do than drink and hang out in their mom's basement. At least, that's how I thought about it at the time. The ritual required either a match or a candle, but I insisted a match would be enough for me. Miles and Renz, however, were determined to buy candles from the nearby shop to create the right atmosphere, as they put it. So, I let them go. They left me alone in my mom's bedroom, where the biggest closet I'd ever seen stood. It was the size of a small room, probably big enough to fit 5 clones of me inside. The wooden exterior was old and worn, but it seemed to call out, "Do it here." I'm not a patient person, so I decided to start the ritual without them. I followed the steps carefully, even though I wasn't sure what I was hoping to see. I stepped inside the closet, and believe me, it was pitch dark. I lit the match and began chanting. I know you are here, don't want you to disappear, but I do have a single plea, may you show yourself to me. Nothing. I felt nothing. The only thing I could feel was my mom's long dresses brushing against my shoulders. It was hot in there, dusty too. I sneezed and coughed, drenched in sweat, but I was determined. I was going to see something, though deep down I wasn't sure if I really wanted to. The match burned out. I lit another one. Again, I chanted, I know you are here, don't want you to disappear, but I do have a single plea, may you show yourself to me. This time, the air in the closet felt heavy, oppressive. I chanted once more, and suddenly I felt a strange mix of heat and cold, like the temperature had completely shifted. Then the match was blown out. No wind, no draft, just someone blowing it out. It wasn't possible. I panicked. I screamed. I did the one thing the rules said not to do. I lost control. I heard soft whispers behind me. My heart raced as I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. Maybe I hadn't actually expected anything to happen, but now that it had, I was terrified. "Guys, this isn't funny. Open up," I shouted. I kicked the door in desperation, but it still wouldn't open. Then I heard laughter, low, chilling laughter, coming from the darkness behind me. My skin went cold. My hand brushed the wooden surface of the closet door, and there I felt something. A face, eyes, a nose, wet teeth smiling. I froze, terror consuming me, and screamed at the top of my lungs. Finally, the door burst open. Lucy was standing there, and I threw myself into her arms, grateful she'd opened the door and pulled me out of that nightmare. Those 2 minutes felt like the longest of my life. "What happened?" she asked, her voice full of concern. I could barely speak. My voice was shaking as I tried to explain, but I couldn't find the words. I just hugged her tightly and let her lead me out of the room. When we reached the stairs, I looked outside. It was dark. The ritual had started in the middle of the afternoon, but somehow time had warped. I was frozen, confused, but Lucy seemed more urgent than ever. "Quick, we need to hide in the bathroom," she exclaimed, her voice tinged with panic. Just before I entered the bathroom, I heard a voice, a distant voice. "Mark! Mark!" It was Miles's voice. I turned and saw them both running toward me, out of breath. "Where were you?" Renz asked. "I was stuck in that damn closet you left me in. I almost died," I shouted. "You weren't in the closet," they both said, confused. I froze. Where was I then? "We need to get to the bathroom with Lucy," I insisted. They looked at each other, bewildered. "Who the hell is Lucy?" Renz asked. "She's our she's... My voice trailed off. A cold realization washed over me, and my heart dropped into my stomach. I froze, the chill of fear running through me. The three of us felt it at the same time. We bolted from the stairs and ran for the bathroom, but the fear was too much. "We don't have a friend named Lucy," I whispered, my voice trembling. I glanced over my shoulder one last time, and what I saw made my blood run cold. A little girl, standing by the stairs, her eyes glowing white, staring directly into mine. A lot of people are going to say all sorts of things about what happened at the house on Lewis Lane. As usual, I'll be the one who gets unfairly judged by a bunch of people too biased to see the facts for what they really are. So it's up to me to set the record straight, with the actual, neutral version of events. No emotions, just facts. Let's start with Brad Meyer, that fucking asshole. He's going to get his, of course, just like he always does. The guy's a walking garbage dump, and the world would be a hell of a lot better off if we could just scrub him out of existence. But no one's going to see it that way. He's the local legend, the all-state football star, which is all anyone cares about. His jock friends, his sycophants, all of them worship him like he's some kind of god. And for what? Because he can throw a ball? Give me a fucking break. Anyway, I was hanging out with Brad that night, and by default, Jenny was there too. Jenny's not as bad as Brad, but she's one of those girls who wears low-cut tops and expects everyone to pay attention to her, then acts all offended when you do. She stares at you like you're a piece of shit for noticing her assets. I didn't have much of a choice, though. I was grounded. Mom had caught me swiping her underwear again, and when I blamed my buddy Rory for it, things went from bad to worse. Mom went full-on helicopter parent mode, shouting about how I shouldn't be hanging out with bad influences like Rory. Whatever, Mom. It's not like we were doing anything crazy with the stuff. They sell for a fortune online, and that's all that matters. So I had to tell Danny, my older brother, that I was grounded without getting into specifics. He didn't ask questions anymore, not after the whole glory hole incident. After that, he just accepted that I had to stay home, and that Mom wanted him to keep an eye on me for the night. So we decided to play Scrabble. Except we didn't play Scrabble. You know why. That fucking dick, Brad Meyer. Brad couldn't keep his hands off Jenny, and she was all too happy to let him do whatever he wanted. They were basically already fucking in the car by the time we were on the road. I didn't even let them go on with it, though. I had to interrupt their disgusting flirting, calling out Brad for probably having a tiny dick. It was the only thing that shut them up for a few minutes. As for Danny and Pam, well, they'd stopped being touchy-feely around me ever since they caught me jerking off in the hallway while they were going at it in Mom and Dad's bed. Danny acted like it was my fault for violating boundaries when they were the ones fucking in our parents' bed. See? Everyone's a dick to me. The night wasn't terrible, though. Danny wasn't so bad. He's my brother. We don't always get along, but he's all right. I didn't mind spending time with him. I didn't mind. Past tense. Fuck. You know who's responsible for all this shit? That dick Brad Meyer. So there we were, at 9 Lewis Lane. Supposedly, we were there to test out the urban legend of Don't Wake Dr. Lewis. In reality, Brad and Jenny were just looking for an excuse to hook up, while Danny and Pam were in on it too, and I was left alone with the jar of Vaseline I always keep in my pocket. But Brad wasn't satisfied with just that. Oh no, he had to make everything about him. He barged into the house like he owned it, acting like we should all be thanking him for his protection. He immediately took the lead, heading straight for the house's massive library, arriving there before anyone else, and finding a board game that was only supposed to exist in legend. Apparently, I was the only one who saw through his act, so I played along to keep the peace with the group. Of course, Brad had to go first. Jenny, by this point, was practically hanging off his arm. All right, so you spin the wheel, then move your piece to the color you land on, Pam said, probably because she was the only one there who could actually read at grade level. The board in front of us looked like a cheap knockoff of a mashup between Sorry and Operation. In the center of the board was a large metal disc with a button in the middle. If you land on a numbered slot, you have to push the button that many times, Pam added. Brad looked confused. So if I land on 3, I push the button 3 times? Pam patiently explained it again, though she was still covering her thighs from my gaze. If you land on a number, you also draw a challenge card. It looks like if you don't complete the challenge, you go back to the start and lose your next turn. Brad decided to take the first turn, naturally. That's when the house creaked. I know, it doesn't sound like much, but for some reason, it threw me off. It was the first noise I'd heard from that place. Suddenly, I realized how incredibly quiet it had been the whole time. Jenny snuggled into Brad. Danny wrapped his arm around Pam, and I, for some reason, clutched the Vaseline, hoping for some comfort. The house was off. For the first time, I thought about how we'd gotten from the front door to this room. But the thing was, I had no idea how we'd even gotten there. My memory of walking from the car to the library was fuzzy at best. "Don't wake Dr. Lewis," Jenny whispered, her voice barely audible. "What?" Brad asked, sounding stupid as ever. "The buttons. The more we push them, the more they agitate Dr. Lewis." The house creaked again, this time louder. "Shit," I muttered under my breath, and then the window slammed shut. That was no coincidence. I could feel it, the anger radiating from the house, like it was absorbing the frustration and rage of Brad, Jenny, the whole football team, and even Rory when he hits me. It was like the house was a pressure cooker, its fury bursting through the walls, flooding the room. My pulse was racing as Brad nonchalantly muttered, "It's just a window," and strolled over to close it, acting like he was the goddamn king of the world, leading the parade of idiots, and I hated him for it. "You ready to fight that ghost, tough guy?" Jenny cooed, running her hand down Brad's arm, rubbing her pheromones all over him. I hated her too. The house, it was feeling me. That's the only way I can explain it. It was like a current was pulsing through my legs and into the wood beneath me, like it was laughing, waiting, watching. "The game will resume when you return to the room," Brad said, and apparently that was that. He was leaving, and we all had to stop everything while he went on his big adventure. What a surprise. "In case you don't make it out alive," Jenny purred, then kissed Brad, practically devouring his face. I was relieved to see him go, but it was a drag being left with only one flashlight for the 4 of us. Brad had claimed it, deciding he was too scared to go anywhere without it. Danny and Pam huddled together in the corner, and Jenny, still awkward as hell, sat across from me, deliberately avoiding eye contact. "So," I said, breaking the silence, "are you and Brad gonna hook up tonight?" Naturally, she gave me that look. The one they all give me when they're trying to act all superior, as if they didn't just spend the last hour throwing themselves all over Brad like cheap wrapping paper. "What did I say about your mouth?" Danny spat at me, his tone colder than usual. "That's Danny for you. Always my hero." Jenny was giving me that I'm uncomfortable vibe. The kind I get when girls can't stand to be around me for more than 5 minutes. So I figured I'd try to be the bigger person. "Why don't we just play the game while we wait for Brad to get back?" I offered with a shrug. "Because the card says we can't play until Brad returns," Jenny replied, snippy, pulling her top together as if she were some sort of 9 on a good day instead of a solid 7 at best. "Right, so we'll pick up where we left off once Brad's back," I said, reaching for the spinner. "But we can still play for fun until then." As I extended my hand, I felt it again. That weird, ominous vibe radiating from the house, joyfully destructive, pulling me toward the game. "Don't," Danny said quietly, his hand suddenly blocking mine. I didn't even see him move. I looked up at him, and for a second I felt a surge of anger. Not at Danny, but at everyone. It was like a tidal wave of resentment, and I knew exactly what to say. "Why not?" I whispered, the words leaving my mouth as though the house itself was speaking through me. "Is it because you know Brad's gonna bang Jenny tonight, and you're pissed because Pam's starting to get bored of you? You know she'll dump you in 6 months after she blows Chad Harrington in the Wendy's parking lot, like you already knew she did last week." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it was going to tear through my rib cage. I had no idea why I said that, or how I even came up with it. But damn, did it work. Danny's face turned ashen in the dim glow of the flashlight, his expression shifting from anger to something much darker, a quiet, simmering rage that scared me. I was terrified, and yet, I couldn't help but feel satisfied. With a slow, deliberate motion, Danny shoved me back and flicked the spinner. It landed on blue. He moved his piece to the blue space. The space had a 1 on it. The room went still, and I could feel the house holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Danny slammed the button once, making Pam flinch. Then he grabbed a card. As Danny read the card, I could feel him pulling away. His eyes were still on the card, but his mind was retreating somewhere else, somewhere far away. My gut was laughing at him, though my brain couldn't make sense of it. "What's it say?" Pam whispered from behind him. I noticed she didn't try to comfort him, or even get close. My breath was shallow as my heart hammered in my chest, each beat louder than the last. Slowly, Danny lowered the card. Then, without another word, he turned and ran. I bolted after him without a second thought. Things were about to spiral out of control, and I could feel it deep in my bones. He was struggling to scale the mezzanine balcony when I finally caught up to him. "God damn it, Danny, stop!" I yelled. "Get the hell back, it's at least 20 feet down." Danny was bigger, stronger than me, but somehow I managed to pry him away from the edge. The two of us crashed to the floor and stars exploded in front of my eyes. He screamed. I turned to him, trying to understand what was happening. That's when I saw it. Danny didn't have a jaw. His neck was a mangled mess, almost entirely gone. "Danny?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. His tongue dropped from his mouth, flopping onto the floor like a dead fish. "What's wrong?" Pam asked, walking slowly toward us, her tone strangely calm. Then she casually peeled both her ears off, like she was stripping the skin off a rotten peach. I was too paralyzed with fear to even scream. Jenny appeared behind her. Her skin had turned ashen, and her eyes, they were no longer human. The whites had vanished, replaced by a sickly gray, leaving behind only tiny black dots in the center. When she spoke, her voice was low, gravelly, like something that had been buried too long. "Did you want to see my tits, Stephen?" she asked before tearing her shirt open. Then, her torso split wide open, spilling out a flood of slimy intestines that cascaded onto the floor, wrapping around Pam's flip-flops. Pam, though, didn't seem to notice. She had shoved one of her own ears into her mouth and was chewing on it greedily. Blood poured from her empty smile as chunks of soft, gooey cartilage fell apart, scattering across the floor, mixing with the intestines. "Good little sheep, aren't they, Stephen?" A voice echoed from down the hall. Brad stood over us, his disgusting, twisted grin plastered across his face. "They all obeyed me, blindly, like perfect little followers," he sneered. "But not you, Stephen." I could never get you to fall in line, no matter how much I tried to manipulate you. You always thought you were smarter than me, didn't you? Yep, I groaned from the floor, hatred burning in my chest. I stretched out my arm, glaring at him. Thought so? Brad continued, his smile almost affectionate in a twisted way. I brought them all here as sacrifices to the house. They were easy to control, but you... He shook his head, as if I were some sort of challenge. You're going to take more effort than all of them combined, but that's just going to make it all the more satisfying. It's a testament to how much better I am than you. He gripped my shoulder. I barely whispered, too quietly for him to hear. What was that? He asked, leaning in closer, that stupid grin still plastered on his face. I said, "Don't wake Dr. Lewis," I murmured as quietly as I could. "Let's just turn off the lights." I swung the heavy metal disc from the game board, crashing it into his temple. The impact was sickening, a satisfying crack echoing in the silence. The next 3 blows were even more gratifying. His bloodied head bounced limply each time, like a rag doll, while my knees pinned his body to the floor, holding him in place. "And this," I growled, raising the disc high above my head with both hands, "is for my brother." "Your brother!" Pam screamed, her voice turning my blood to ice. I looked up to find her, completely unharmed, her ears firmly attached to her head. She was sobbing. "Don't come any closer," Jenny shouted from somewhere around the corner, her voice shrill and filled with terror. She, too, was unscathed. "Just back off, Pam, he's dangerous." "No," I gasped, my breath coming in ragged gasps from the exertion. "No, you don't get it. I was protecting myself, protecting all of us from Brad." "Brad was here with us the whole time, you psycho!" Jenny shrieked, her words cutting through the air like a knife. "Holy shit, what did you do?" Brad's voice echoed in a strange, muffled way, like he was underwater. "Please, just go away," Pam whispered, her voice barely audible through her sobs. "Please. Danny means more to me than..." "Stop. Just stop. I don't know what's happened. I was the only one who could protect my brother from..." Pam wailed, the sound gut-wrenching. A sudden, unbearable heat surged in my chest, and I didn't want to look down. But I did. Beneath my knees was Danny, his head a mangled mess of blood. Shiny white bone peeked through where the skin had torn away from his temple. His eyes, my brother's eyes, were in my hands, like grotesque, bloody melon balls, leaving gaping, empty sockets in his skull. The muscles inside twitched, still convulsing, like a dying fish. My hands were soaked, dripping with his blood. And in that moment, it all clicked. I understood, with terrifying clarity, exactly what had happened, why my brother was dying in front of me. That dick, Brad Meyer. I've always had strange experiences, but this one will be my last. My town is peaceful by day, but come nightfall it turns into something from a nightmare. It's not your typical town, and though I don't know where the horrors we face come from, I know this much. If you don't follow the rules, you'll vanish, or worse. I left when I turned 18, but now, 7 years later, I've returned to bury my uncle, bringing my fiancée along. We never should have come back. There's an old urban legend about my town, one that dates back centuries. It speaks of dark figures that lurk in the shadows. I never paid much attention to it, never encountered them. Until now. When I was young, my parents warned me about these figures and taught me the rules to keep safe. But why rules? Because they're so malevolent that calling them evil doesn't quite capture it. This is the story of how I first came face to face with them, and how it will lead to my death. Rules for surviving the dark figures. Never turn off all the lights. Always leave at least one lamp on in every room. If you see someone without a shadow, do not engage. If they approach, ignore them. They are not human anymore. They are the taken. Never leave the house between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Always lock doors and windows during this time. If you see the figures, it means they found you. As we prepared for my uncle's funeral, I told my fiancée about the legend and the rules. She's a skeptic, but she knows I believe and promised to follow them if it would make me feel safer. My hometown's population is about 20,000, and as we drove through, old memories flooded back. Playing around the cathedral, hanging out in the park, and spending hours at Bobby's Cafe and Laura's Diner. Nothing had changed in 7 years. The funeral was emotional. My uncle was more than family. He was my protector after my parents died in a car crash when I was 13. He taught me to fish, helped me with school, bought me my first beer at 16, and gave me advice about life and girls. He was always there for me. Afterward, we drove to my parents' old house, which had been empty since their deaths. But my fiancée, unusually quiet and pale, didn't seem herself. When I asked if something had spooked her, or if the funeral had reminded her of her sister, who died in a fire 3 years ago, she replied, "2 people at the funeral had no shadow, and they vanished into thin air." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I asked if they'd approached her. Thankfully, she said no. Her experience set me on edge. As soon as we reached the house, I locked every door and window, checked the lamps, and made sure at least one light was on in each room. We opened a bottle of wine and talked about my uncle, the urban legend, and her unsettling encounter. I glanced at the clock. It was 11:45 p.m. We decided to call it a night, hoping to leave early the next morning. She fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the funeral and the emotional roller coaster, but I couldn't sleep. My mind kept drifting back to my own experiences with the darkness. I picked up a book from the shelf, and as I did, one flew off and landed at my feet, nearly giving me a heart attack. I picked it up, my hands shaking, and opened it. Inside, I found a note. "Oliver, if you're reading this, it means I'm dead, and you've come back for my funeral. I haven't been honest with you. Your parents didn't die in that car accident. They were taken by the figures in the darkness. I've encountered them, which is why I'm writing this. I'm not long for this world. Since you left, I've spent years researching these figures. I've uncovered some crucial information. Bright light repels them, at least temporarily. They can't cross a line of salt, so always carry some with you. Sacred grounds will push them back, but only for a while. Eventually, they'll find a way in. Since you left, they've become more cunning. If you suspect someone is one of the taken, but their shadow is still visible, use infrared light. If the person shows up clearly in the light, they're safe. If not, then you've broken rule number 2. I've left an infrared camera in the garage for you. I hope you never have to use this, Oliver, and I'm sorry for not being upfront about your parents. Love, Uncle Tom." The letter dropped from my hands as a chilling realization hit me. "No," I whispered, horrified as the weight of the truth sank in. My stomach churned. I stumbled to the garage and found the infrared camera. My hands were shaking as I turned it on, my heart pounding in my chest. I headed to the bedroom. When I walked in, I froze. My fiancée was sitting on the edge of the bed, her back turned. With trembling hands, I pointed the camera at her, and a scream caught in my throat. There was nothing, no form, no shape, just darkness. My breath caught, and I shouted in desperation, "No!" Then slowly her head twisted around, 180 degrees. Her eyes locked onto me, cold and vacant, and she lunged. In a frantic panic, I slammed the door shut, just in time, my heart racing. I ran downstairs, grabbed my car keys, and fled into the night. It's been 2 days since that night, and I'm sitting in a cafe now, barely able to hold the pen. I don't have much time left. If you're reading this, pray to any god you believe in that you never cross paths with them. If you do, follow the instructions. They might give you a little more time, though I'm not sure how much. My sister is an urban legend. I never liked them growing up, probably because of her. You know the type of urban legend that always starts with, "My brother's cousin had a friend who..." Yeah, that kind of story. I think that's why people enjoy urban legends, because they feel real, but not so real that it hits too close to home. They're always about someone distant, a friend of a friend, making it just enough of a mystery to be fun, but not so tragic that it's actually scary. But every legend has to start somewhere, and for those who lived through it, the stories aren't fun. They're just the truth. Most people have forgotten that I ever had an older sister, let alone who she was. Her name was Michelle, but everyone called her Missy. She loved baking. We used to make cupcakes together. That's my strongest memory of her, and it's one I hold on to, especially when the world feels like it's spinning out of control. Missy was 12 years older than me, and I was only 6 when she died. She had a best friend named Ava. Ava was sweet too. She used to come over, and the two of them would let me join in their games, even though I was the annoying little sister. I can hardly remember Ava's face, but I remember her laugh, the kind that made you feel warm inside. But then Ava got sick. Leukemia. She was in and out of the hospital, but I wasn't allowed to see her toward the end. But Missy? She went to see her every single day. When Ava died, Missy made a promise. She would keep visiting the cemetery every day, no matter what. And she did. It was her senior year, and she should have been out with her friends, partying, living her teenage years. But instead, she spent every afternoon alone at the cemetery, sitting by Ava's grave. At first, our parents didn't mind. They thought it was her way of grieving. But soon, they became worried. "This isn't healthy," I overheard my mom telling my dad one night. "She's torturing herself." My dad, usually quiet, was clear. "We should talk to her." I listened from the top of the stairs, feeling a tight knot in my chest. I wanted to intervene, but I couldn't. I just hoped that once they talked to Missy, she would come home sooner and everything would go back to normal. But we never got that chance. That night, Missy didn't come home when she usually did. When the knock came at the door, my parents knew something was wrong. Missy never knocked. When we saw the police officer at the door, we knew. The details came later. It was winter. The roads were icy, and a deer may have jumped in front of Missy's car, causing her to swerve. She lost control and crashed just outside the cemetery, rolling the car into a ditch. The officers told us she died instantly, without any pain. My parents buried her next to Ava. I begged them not to. I couldn't explain why it felt wrong, but I knew deep down that she should be with us. It didn't matter. My parents felt it was what Missy would have wanted. Ava's family agreed, so that's where my sister rests, in Sandwood Cemetery, beside her best friend. I guess that's when the legend began. A few years later, when the town had moved on, the story started. People talked about the two girls buried together in Sandwood, about how their deaths had never been fully explained. The rumors ran wild. Some versions said that Missy and Ava were lovers, torn apart by death, only to be reunited in the afterlife. Other stories claimed Ava was jealous of Missy's life and crashed her car to even the score. Some said it was just an accident. But in all versions of the story, one thing remained the same. Missy didn't die by chance. It was Ava's ghost, or death itself, that caused the crash. Or, and this one hurts the most, maybe she rolled the car on purpose. Maybe she wanted to die, and crashing it was the only way she could make it look like an accident. I hate that version. It's the one that feels the most real, the one I can't shake. By the time I reached high school, the story of Missy was an urban legend. People didn't think twice about it, and they certainly didn't know that Missy was my sister. They had forgotten her last name in the stories, and given the age gap, most people just assumed she was an only child. But she wasn't. She was my sister. That's my sister. They're turning into a legend. To most people, it's just a fun, spooky story. To me, it's a painful, never-healing wound. I never talked about Missy. I didn't want anyone asking about the legends or reminding me of the stories. So I kept my distance, acting uninterested if anyone brought it up. It worked, for the most part, until one day near the start of my senior year. A couple of my friends, Sarah, Tom, and Greg, wanted to go to Sandwood at night, and they begged me to come along. They say if you go when the moon's full, you can hear the sound of the two girls laughing together, Sarah whispered, her voice dropping to a hush. We were in study hall, and I just wanted to escape this dumb conversation. I rolled my eyes. Of course it was the full moon again. Some people were so unoriginal. But then, as I half listened, I thought about Ava and her laugh. I tried to recall Missy's laugh, but I couldn't. I couldn't bring it to mind. All I could think of was how odd it felt that I couldn't. Before I could process it, Greg and Tom joined Sarah's plan, both of them eager for the adventure. "Why not?" Tom said. "It's a nice night for it. It's not like we'll get another chance." Greg, with that annoying grin, added, "I'm out of this shitty town as soon as I graduate. Might as well take a good story with me, right?" Greg always acted so tough, so edgy. Sometimes it made me cringe, but I still liked him. I should have said no. I should have made up some excuse. Told them I had homework, or that I needed to spend time with my family. Anything, because deep down, I didn't want to make a mockery of Missy's death. I didn't want to make light of the pain my family had been through. But her laugh, I couldn't stop thinking about it, even though I knew I wouldn't hear it, knew the stories were just made up. Yeah, I'm in. I had to know. I had to take the chance. Greg drove. His parents were wealthy and let him borrow any car he wanted, so we piled into one of them around 10. I told my parents I was going to a study group and would be home late. They trusted me, thought I was finally moving on from Missy's death. They couldn't have been more wrong. We drove to the cemetery and parked by the road, leaving the windows down so we could hear any ghostly sounds. Everyone cracked open a beer, except for Greg. He didn't drink, never did. I think about him a lot now, and how he was always pretending to be someone else. Not that it matters now. We sat there for a while, laughing, joking about school. Sarah was practically buzzing with excitement, clearly eager for something to happen. It was all a game to them, something fun to do on a boring night. I wasn't having fun, though. My stomach was in knots, not with nervous excitement, but with an overwhelming sense that something was wrong. Like I was waiting for a disaster, but I couldn't tell what it was. That feeling got worse around midnight. That's when Sarah said the laughter would come. She claimed it was when the veil between life and death was the thinnest, when you could hear the dead. I didn't believe her. I'd been hoping for a sign from Missy ever since she died, and I never got one. I was certain that once you were gone, you were gone. No amount of crying or wishing would bring you back. I was lost in those thoughts when Sarah suddenly hushed us. "Hey, listen. Do you hear that?" I thought she was just messing with us. We all fell quiet, straining to hear. The wind rustled the trees. For a split second, just a sliver, I thought I heard something. Someone walking through the grass. And then it was gone. Tom, already halfway through, snorted. "I don't hear shh." Before he could finish, the screaming started. It came from all around us, like we were in the eye of a storm, but this was no ordinary storm. It was deafening. A wailing, shrieking sound so horrific it felt like the very air was being torn apart. It was like hell had opened up around us, and the voices of the damned were screaming in agony. It was so loud it shook the car. No, wait, it wasn't the car shaking. Something else was. The car was rocking violently, back and forth, so hard that Sarah and I were bouncing in our seats. I slammed my head against the top of the car, and for a moment, my vision went black. The screams of my friends mixed with the voices from outside as the car jolted, and for a split second, I thought it might flip over. I froze for a moment, thinking about the car rolling, about my death, and what my parents would think if I died just like Missy had. Then Tom's voice sliced through the chaos. "Roll the windows up. Jesus Christ! Roll the windows up!" I didn't even process what he said. My hand was on the window crank before I could think. In seconds, the window was up. But Sarah, curled up in the back seat, was sobbing uncontrollably, her body rocking with the force of the shaking. I scrambled over her, trying to close her window, fighting to stay grounded as the car continued to rock. Then, the engine roared to life, and the screaming from outside reached a fever pitch. The shaking intensified, throwing me to the floor. And then Greg floored the gas, and we shot off into the night like a bat out of hell. I know it's a cliché, but it's exactly how we felt. The shaking stopped. The screams stopped. Everything stopped, except for the swearing from Tom and Greg and Sarah's sobs. I sat there stunned, listening to the wind rush by as we sped away from the cemetery. But just before we turned onto the main road, just before we lost sight of the cemetery completely, I could have sworn I heard it. A voice, faint but unmistakable, calling my name. And it was the voice of someone who had been dead for 12 years. That night, everything changed. It ended our friendship. At the time, it seemed huge, but looking back, most high school friendships fade into obscurity. We would have drifted apart sooner or later. It just felt so sudden, so final, that it was hard to accept. But maybe it was for the best. After that night, our experience became part of the legend. People stopped telling stories about the two girls' laughter and started talking about the screaming, the shaking, and hell itself. I stopped listening. I didn't want to hear it anymore. I just wanted it all to vanish. But things like that don't go away, do they? It's been years since I graduated and left my hometown. Years since I last visited Sandwood to put flowers on Missy's grave, praying that I would wake up from this nightmare. I don't have nightmares anymore. Nothing in my dreams could be worse than what I've witnessed in reality. This year marks the 30th anniversary of my sister's death. My parents want me to come home, to visit the cemetery with them on the anniversary. I know I should. I know it's important to them, and it's my duty as their daughter. But as the season shifts and the first snowflakes begin to fall, coating the roads in ice, I find myself hesitating. Because I'm terrified. Terrified of the day I return. Terrified of hearing my name whispered once again in the dead silence of the cemetery, calling me to look at what's waiting on the other side.
Stories may end, but the fear remains. Subscribe to uncover more secrets hidden in the darkness. Until we meet again in the world of nightmarish shadows.